What happens when you're good at what you do, but no longer want your life to revolve around doing it? Like, for instance, have you ever looked at what you do for work and thought, I'm actually really good at this, but I don't want this to be the rest of my life? Yeah, well, that was something that I struggled with. I could do my job really well. I was capable, experienced, and my work provided the income and security that I needed to live every single day. But underneath all of that, I felt really empty. And I kept thinking to myself, there must be more to life than going to work for 5 days per week and only having the weekends free. And I really wanted to do more with my life as well. I wanted to experience more. I didn't want to feel like I was giving most of my life to a career simply because I needed the money. Knowing that I wanted more didn't actually mean that I knew what more was. And all I knew at that time was that I had something in me that was trying to emerge through me. And what I needed to do was to actually take that step back and just acknowledge it and figure out what the next steps were. Here at the Art of Beautiful Thinking, our perspective is that the authentic self is the individual expression of infinite intelligence. Because life is creative and evolutionary, that deeper intelligence is continually seeking expression through your capacities, desires, experience, relationships, creativity, and contribution. Basically, it wants to evolve through you. So being good at something and finding meaning are not necessarily the same. You know, life doesn't only seek security, it's actually seeking expression. Welcome to the Art of Beautiful Thinking, the podcast where we explore the relationship you have with yourself and how that relationship shapes the life that you create. I'm Yvette, a metaphysical mentor, coach, and self-relationship teacher. Now, this is where timeless metaphysical wisdom meets ordinary life, helping you know yourself more deeply, trust your inner direction, and consciously shape what comes next. Today, I actually want to talk about what it means when being good at your job is no longer enough and why that feeling really does deserve your attention. So let me tell you a story of when I was a little kid, okay? For as long as I can remember, I have always wanted to be my own boss. I always wanted to have my own business. And when I was little, I kind of expected that that was what I was going to do. You know, when I got older, that's what I was going to do. I was going to start my own business. But then throughout my childhood, I actually saw my parents who were very entrepreneurial. They were, you know, my father was a builder. My mother had retail shops. I saw them lose everything. And in that losing everything, I saw how important money was in basically security and survival. So I ended up falling into a job and not pursuing a business. And at first, in my early 20s or even late teens, I couldn't quite figure out what that job would be because in my head, I always had that I was going to have my own business. But then all of a sudden, I'm finding myself going, oh, well, what am I going to do for a job? And so in my early 20s, I kind of flitted around a bit until I figured out what it was that I wanted to do. And then when I did land a job and I started finding that I was fairly good at what I was doing, I was building a career in it, then I often found that people would look at me and go, oh, you're really capable, you're really reliable, you're good at your job, and other people recognize and reward that, right? That's just what happens. And you get promoted and you get given even greater responsibility and you become that person that, well, people in the workplace depend on. And over time, your competence can become part of your identity. And I know that's exactly what happened with me. I kind of went, all right, well, I'm earning good money. You know, we got a mortgage, we got married, we were traveling a lot, you know, we've had cars and all that type of thing. And so all of a sudden we found ourselves in this rat race on that hamster wheel, constantly going. And in my early 20s, I was kind of going, oh, okay, I didn't love what I was doing, but I kind of went, I'm good at it, right? I'm good at it. So, and I kind of went, well, I'd like to do this next in my career and I'd like to do this next. And I kind of had this idea of what that corporate ladder looked like for me. And I found that every time I did step up into a new role and evolved in my career, I'd be happy for maybe 3 months, 6 months, but then this deep aching inside of me would continue to play out. And what that actually was that inner yearning that I had as a child of wanting to be in business for myself. But I kept pushing it down, right? Constantly kept pushing it down because being good at something was telling me that I have developed the ability to be really good in my career. But it didn't necessarily mean that it was the right expression of who I was. So what was happening was I was actually really good professionally at stuff and people relied on me, and that made it even harder for me to kind of figure out what it was that I really, this yearning that I had and how I could go about living my life through that. And so for years and years, I would, every Sunday, I'd hit that point, and I'm pretty sure we've all been there. I'd hit that point where I'd go, what am I doing? I don't want to do this job anymore. But then I kept thinking, well, maybe I just need to build more skills. Maybe I just need to move up the corporate ladder a little bit more, and that'll satisfy me. And I just kept thinking that all the time. And every time I would do that again, I'd get to that point where I just go, oh, this is exciting initially for 3 to 6 months. And then, oh, I'm bored, or this is not what I thought it was going to be, things like that. And that was pretty much, that was happening because I was ignoring that deeper yearning that I had inside of me to be my own boss, to be in business for myself. And that's where competence can become a real trap, right? Because the better you become at your work, for instance, at your job, the more valuable you get, and possibly you feel more trapped. And I know that's how I felt, because I was kind of going, how do I leave this when I've built such a good career, I'm earning really, really good money, and it's financial security. So why would I risk that to go off and work for myself, right? And so greater responsibility often brings better income, status, and security, and that's exactly the position that I was in. And it also gives you more to lose if you change direction. So that was my fear. My fear was kind of going, but if I go and pursue something, which at that point I didn't know what it was that I wanted to pursue, but I just knew that I wanted to be in business for myself, well, I could lose absolutely everything. Am I willing to risk that? And so for ages I procrastinated. And every single day, though, I would still wake up with this very deep sadness because I wasn't following through what I believed at that point was my truth. Okay, that deeper expression, that infinite intelligence trying to express itself through you. Because I honestly believe that we all have a blueprint that we're here to express in this lifetime. And I was ignoring that and pushing it down. And because I was constantly ignoring it, that yearning was becoming stronger. But at the same time, there was a sadness that was coming with it because I wasn't actually pursuing it. I wasn't following it whatsoever. So, and the other interesting thing that I found through continuing in my career was that other people may not, if you go and speak to other people, may not fully understand your dissatisfaction because they only see that you've actually got a really successful career or that you look like a success. And you may really struggle to justify wanting something different when there's obviously nothing that looks really wrong, okay? But in my instance, that's what was wrong. That's not what I wanted to be doing. However, it took me quite a while to kind of really step back and kind of admit that I was on the wrong path. And that, that takes a lot of courage. And I was also looking at gratitude as well and kind of going, really need to appreciate the income and the experience and the opportunities that my job has actually provided me. And that this is really something that I should just be grateful for because there are so many people out there that have got it far worse than I do. And in fact, I'm probably quite privileged in a way. And you can still acknowledge that and still acknowledge that role actually no longer fulfills you. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you or there's something that you're ungrateful for. You can still be grateful for it, okay? But wanting more doesn't automatically make someone, like I look at it, you're not more selfish. You're not going to be ungrateful, and you're definitely not being unrealistic. You can still be grateful for a job with what that job has actually given you without believing that you need to stay there forever because it's helped you get there. It's helped you in your current situation. It's helped you with your financial security. It's helped you, put a roof over your head. It's helped you raise your kids, whatever the case may be. So you can still be grateful for a job, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's what's fulfilling you. So let's now have a look at distinguishing between what we perceive as a bad incident, for instance, at work, versus that deeper yearning that you just don't want to be there. Because what I usually find, well, in my instance, you could have occasions where you are being bullied at work, and I know I've experienced that, and it's horrendous when that happens, and you feel absolutely like, yeah, there's just absolutely nowhere you can turn, especially when I was doing consulting contracting. There was no one I could turn to. It was literally just put up with it or lose the role ultimately. And I remember just kind of going, okay, well, I really don't like that particular leadership style with this particular person. I am being really bullied. I'd come home and I'd cry. And what actually made it worse was I knew that this is not what I wanted in my life. Not the sense of none of us want to be bullied, but I didn't want to be in a corporate role. Yet I was forcing myself to turn up every single day. And that in itself was quite exhausting. And the difference between just, like being upset because of a situation at work versus a deeper frustration because you're not following your path. What the difference there is that you can go to sleep one night and the next day that situation is over and everything is fine. And you'll just move on and you kind of go, well, okay, we had a moment yesterday and we're all good. But when you've got that deeper yearning, that deeper infinite intelligence trying to express through you, like you're trying to express that blueprint that you are here to express in this lifetime and you're not, it doesn't go away. It keeps pulling at you and it keeps getting you to step in a certain direction. And certain things, like if I look at in the corporate world, yes, I was earning good money. Yes, I was achieving things, but also it was a hard slog. It was not something that I would say came easy because I had to really push myself all the time and prove myself all the time. However, when you are stepping into a path that you believe is your expression, there is no proving. It's just you expressing. And I find it actually makes your heart sing. You become a lot more at home with yourself because you are being truthful to your calling as such. And that can be different for everyone. It's not necessarily always a career. It just happens to be for me. That was my part of my blueprint, was to work for myself, right? Now, the other thing that I find when you want to distinguish, say, from a bad period versus that persistent emptiness or calling, is that boredom that may be resolved through a new challenge doesn't actually get resolved, yeah? Or that burnout that requires recovery and support doesn't really suffice. So you still got this deeper, persistent sense that this way of living is no longer enough for you and that you are really wanting to express more. So you could consider some of these things, ask yourself these types of questions. Does the feeling disappear when you've actually had a rest, or does it keep returning? Or is it this particular workplace that feels wrong, or the work itself? And if you were to get a promotion or, say, a higher salary, would that actually change how you feel? This is the thing to reflect upon, because emptiness can be really, really good information, but it isn't always a complete diagnosis. So before making a major decision, you need to understand what the feeling is actually pointing you towards. So work may be providing you, like, say, with that income, but it's not necessarily providing you with meaning. And really, when it came down to the crux for me, that's ultimately what it was. I wasn't getting, even though I wanted to work for myself and always had, I actually wanted to do work that was meaningful. I wanted to do work that was going to put a smile on someone's face, make some form of an impact, possibly change lives, that type of thing. I didn't want to just get paid to go and do anything. If I wanted to, I could do anything if that was the case. But that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something that was actually going to make a difference in the lives of those around me. So the idea is work does occupy a significant amount of our waking life, and we exchange more than labor for money. We exchange our time, our attention, our emotions, our energy, and also our creative capacity. So when we choose a job, we have to keep all of those in mind. We can't just go, well, okay, I'm just going to go do anything like I did in my early 20s and kind of went, oh, well, I don't know what I'm going to do, so I'll try anything, and then just happened to land in what ended up being a career. So the problem arises when work consumes so much of life that there's little space left for any form of meaning, and that includes creativity, relationships, experience, or any form of contribution anywhere else in our lives, because our work is taking up so much time. Because not only do we work 8 hours a day, there's also how much it takes out of our free time when we're at home, and when we're getting ready for work, and when we come home and we're trying to wind down, and the commute, etc. But it's also that emotional impact, the emotional toll. You don't just switch off as soon as you walk through the front door. I know my husband and I used to say to ourselves, as soon as we hop in the car on our way home, we would just go blur about our day just to get it off our chest. So as soon as we got home and we walked through the front door, that'd be it. We didn't want to talk about work. But that wasn't always the case, because if you had a really, really stressful day, especially if I go back to the days when I was actually being bullied, you couldn't switch off because it had impacted you so deeply. It's like a wound. So it's really important to consider all of those attributes when it comes to a job, because we're spending so much time there. So your work doesn't have to carry the whole weight of your purpose, okay? It doesn't have to carry the whole weight of your meaning, but it also shouldn't consume the life your income is supposed to support, okay? So let's explore this a little bit. Is the real problem the work? Or is it how much of your life the job occupies? So for me, it was both. I actually found that it was the work after a while, but I was also resentful of how many hours I had to put in to get the pay that I wanted to get. I was thinking there has to be a better way, right? So could you actually develop meaning outside of the job? Like you could do volunteer stuff. You could, spend more time with your family if that's where your meaning comes from. But it actually is, could you develop that? Do you need to set up different boundaries, like set boundaries about the hours that you'll do or what responsibilities that you'll take on in your job, so you actually have some more headspace for other things outside of your job? Or has the work itself genuinely run its course? And I know that's what it was for me. It had run its course, but I still couldn't figure out what it was that I wanted to do, right? I knew that I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what that was. So let's explore that a little bit more. Why can you actually be successful but not necessarily resolve that feeling of emptiness? Okay. So let's think about that. Achievement can provide satisfaction and it can provide financial reward, but it can't decide what matters for you. And if I go back to, talking about promotions, when you get promoted, you may have that temporary momentum of feeling fantastic until the excitement of that wears off and you're back to BAU and you're kind of going, well, that underlying feeling, that underlying emptiness or question is still there. So external recognition can confirm definitely that you are performing in your role really well, but it can't confirm that role is actually what is still true for you. So success can tell you that you're doing something well, but it can't tell you whether that something is still worth doing, right? So that emptiness that you feel can actually be a really good invitation to reconnect with yourself. And this is where we talk about, within the art of beautiful thinking, that we understand that the authentic self is that individual expression of infinite intelligence. And within that infinite intelligence or that individual expression, there is a blueprint specifically unique to you that you are here to express. And that deeper intelligence expresses through our particular capabilities, our desires, our creativity, and our direction. So when we become so occupied with performing roles and meeting expectations that we stop listening to what is trying to emerge through us, that is when we can feel so empty, so sad, so lost. You know, when that outer role that we are identifying with and have identified with for such a long time no longer allows enough expression of the person who we want to express, who we are becoming. And this doesn't mean that every unpleasant feeling that you're having is your infinite intelligence trying to get full expression. There's a difference between just feeling a little bit off versus a yearning, versus something that's really pulling at you to go in a certain direction. And it really deserves, it absolutely, that reoccurring dissatisfaction absolutely deserves honest attention. And it also deserves discernment. So I don't believe that emptiness is necessarily telling you that you need to quit whatever you're doing, but it may be giving you an instruction on what path or what next steps you need to take. And it may simply be asking you to stop, pay attention, and become honest about what is no longer enough. So the problem may not be that you have no purpose. It may be that you've become disconnected from your truth. Now, that was the instance, if I look at with myself. I was ignoring my truth. I kept pushing it down until it got to a point where I couldn't push it down anymore. And I absolutely had to take action, because you could say the pain of ignoring it was far worse than the pain of continuing in my job. And I just kind of went, okay, I've got to do something here, because I don't want to get, I'm getting older here as well. We don't reverse in our age. We actually continue to grow, no matter how well science is with anti-aging. But, you look at that and you go, well, okay, I'm getting older, and I don't want to get to a point in my life where I look back and I go, wow, that yearning that I had since a child, you know what? I never followed through with it because I didn't trust myself enough, because I thought the job was enough, because the money that I earned was really, really good and it was providing security, and, well, that was enough and I should be grateful. But really, it's not, because you're here to express. You're here to show the truth of what you want to express in this lifetime. So why not do it? Hey? I agree. I think it is something we all should be doing. So one of the other things that I noticed as well, when I went to that realization and went, oh, enough is enough and I've got to follow through with this, was I didn't demand an immediate answer from it. I kind of went, well, yep, okay, I know that I want to work for myself. I know that I want to be my own boss, but I don't know what it is that I want to do. And rather than kind of going off and just going, well, I'm just going to leave my job and start something no matter what it is because I'm working for myself, I went, no, I want to do something, as I said, that was meaningful. So I took a step aside and went, well, what is it? What are all the things in my career that I've really enjoyed and that I find come naturally to me, or, I may even built a skill around it, but I actually really enjoy it. And I sat down with that and went, okay, I wrote a list. And then I also sent off a number of questions to different people that I know, who know me. And I think it was about 5 or 6 questions, asking a little bit about what would they come to me for. And the interesting thing was the answers that they all provided, which were all slightly different with how they communicated it, but it actually all came back to coaching, mentoring, personal growth, things like that. And teacher, educator. So I was kind of going, well, that's interesting, because that's exactly what I thought. And they're the areas that I actually really, really enjoy. And funny enough, 15 years ago, I had actually undertaken a national coaching cert. And I had done coaching for a little bit in a health business as well as in a leadership firm. And I really, really enjoyed it. But I kind of went, it's not paying me enough. I need to go back to the corporate world. But that's the thing that I really enjoyed. So I went, all right, well, let's go off and turn this into an international coaching cert, because I want to kind of differentiate myself from other people out there, because there's so many people out there that are coaches. And I kind of had to, it's that whole thing of self-reflection and recognizing the direction to take. And this is where you've got to be really mindful of when asking yourself that question of what do I want to do instead of a job. And as I said, I was reflecting on it going, I don't know what it is that I want to do. Like I've got no idea what that next thing is. But rather than just focusing on going, well, what do I do instead? Because when you just focus on that, it's actually a really good way to shut down that original question of I want to work for myself or I want a different career. Because you're focusing on, well, I don't know what that is. So the first actual step is to recognize that you're dissatisfied, that there's something else calling at you. It's to recognize it, because recognition comes before any form of direction. And then when the direction does come, it can then be explored more carefully through reflections, conversations, experimentation, and any form of practical planning that you want to put together. So you don't need to know what the new life looks like before you can admit that there's something about the current one that needs to actually change. Yeah. So do some reflection. And a great way to do that is complete these statements without trying to solve everything. All right. So ask yourself this: what this work gives me is. And then ask yourself what this work takes from me is. And what about what I can no longer pretend is? And the one that I love the most, if nothing changed over the next 5 years, I would feel. Now, I really, really encourage you to notice what appears rather than immediately turning into some form of, I've got to walk away from, my life. Just really notice what appears. Especially with that one, if nothing changed over the next 5 years, I would feel, because that was the thing for me when I spoke about getting older and then reflecting, going, wow, I don't want to live with any regrets here about not pursuing that thing that I had as a child that has lasted with me all of my life and I've constantly ignored it. I don't want to ignore it anymore. I don't want to live with that regret. And so that was the thing for me when I went, if I don't do something now, my next 5 years is going to look exactly the same as now, and I'll probably be more resentful because I haven't actually followed through with what was trying to express itself through me. So being good at your job is really valuable, yeah? But it isn't a lifelong obligation to keep doing work that leaves you deeply empty. You're allowed to appreciate your career, and you're allowed to appreciate what your career has given you and still recognize that you want more from your life. You're also allowed to recognize that before you recognize what comes next. The first step isn't necessarily leaving. The first step is learning your truth, listening to that deeper yearning that's trying to express itself. Because once you stop using security to dismiss what you feel, you can begin asking more powerful questions like, what do I actually want more of? And that is what we're going to explore in the next episode. We're going to look at the uncomfortable place that comes after that realization of knowing you want more from life, but having absolutely no idea what more is. So if this is something you've experienced, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what word best describes how your work makes you feel. Is it empty, repetitive? Is it exhausting, or is it something else? And if you're at a point where you'd like a structured way to explore this further, begin with the Authentic Life Blueprint Workbook. Or if you want to actually go deeper and you're at an immediate turning point and you would love that deeper insight, book a one-to-one clarity session with me. You'll find the links to both of them in the episode description. So guys, thank you for joining me. I love you guys so much. And until next time, remember to think beautifully and live brilliantly. Ciao for now. We'd like to say a huge thank you to our incredible audience for your continued support. Our mission is to ignite your spark, empowering you to be a beacon of light for others. We'd love to hear from you. So if you've got any questions that you would like answered in future episodes or just want to share some insights, connect with us on our Facebook community page. If you're looking for additional resources, go to our website. You'll find the link below. And remember, the absolute best way to help us grow is to share this episode with your friends and family and to subscribe to the Art of Beautiful Thinking podcast. So until next time, think beautifully and live brilliantly.